Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of NapChats. NapChats is a conversation between me and Pastor Caleb Schultz and my wife Johanna during the time when our girls are sleeping about parenting in a biblical worldview and kind of wrestling with some ideas that we wanted to kind of bring you in on our discussions about parenting that we just organically have, but then record them. So that's what we're doing. So what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to actually do probably a few episodes on discipline. Not because we have all the answers to discipline, but I think it's valuable to watch a young couple wrestle through how to discipline their child with a biblical lens. So we're going to start going through it. But before we talk about how to discipline or anything, I want to talk about why do we discipline? What are we trying to discipline our children to be? Because discipline is connected to the word disciple, like we're teaching our kids something. So what are we teaching them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Bible is pretty clear that we're by nature sinful. We're rebellious by nature, right? So rebellious against God, rebellious against really any sort of thing that will try to take control of us, any sort of authority in general. And so what you do in discipline is you try to instill in the person an understanding that reality is larger than themselves, I think is really the very basic idea. Because really, I mean, if you're the only person who exists on the face of the earth, you don't need discipline, right?
Sure.
You can just do whatever you want because it doesn't affect anybody else. And your life doesn't really matter because no one's depending on you, nor are you dependent on anybody else. And so how you treat your body or what you do with your time or any of those sorts of things, they don't really matter. So discipline is the process of teaching a child that they exist in a society, whether you want to call that society your nation or your city or your family, but then training them in what are the values of that society.
Oh, okay. So is it teaching them that there's an authority too then? Or
yeah,
is that less about it?
So that's pretty universal across all societies. We would say because God instituted he gave us the fourth commandment, so honor your father and mother, which is basically fall into, under the authority of either your family, so particularly the father of the family, and then in your church, your pastor, and then in your state, your governing authorities. And so authority in and of itself is a biblical institution that God has given us. So like that is going to be universally true, whether you're a Christian parent or not. But particularly for us as Christians, we can speak in terms of God created the institutions of authority, family, church, state, as just like automatic for the way that humans are built.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, so a thought I had about it was that there's a lot of respect that needs to be had. Like you want to teach your kids that there's respect for our things, for your parents, but then all of that really comes under the umbrella of respect for God. Like you fear and respect God ultimately, you fear and respect your parents, you respect taking care of your things, and so you're trying to teach them those boundaries out of respect. And so that was kind of the thought I had on that. Is that accurate, biblical?
Yeah. So Satan, by his nature, is an agent of chaos, right? So I think a really good movie, if you watch movies, I don't watch that many movies, but the Joker in the Batman movies, I don't remember which one it is, which shows you how much I watch movies, but the Joker is a really good picture of Satan because he doesn't really have an end goal. He just wants to destroy everything. He just wants to cause chaos everywhere. And so discipline is, again, the process of seeing things that are ordered and wanting to maintain that order in some way rather than destroy the order.
Yeah.
So whether that's the order of people or societies or possessions.
Yeah. Okay. And I would say on that, I mean, the opposite of that, like the chaos, that comes from basically just following what you want. Like, I want to do this thing.
Right.
And it's seeing yourself as the person to be respected, almost like reversing it, rather than I respect these things and I respect my parents and I respect God, I respect myself and I want to do this thing. And it's demanding respect me instead of respecting parents.
Yeah, and I think we can very basically say discipline is a thing that is imposed on another person. So parents obviously discipline their children, but we have a way of talking about this that you would discipline yourself, right? And so the Bible talks about it too, but the idea that you would not follow your own desires in the moment because you will cause chaos in your own life, even beyond what you might cause in somebody else's life if you're not disciplined. So again, this idea of you're the only person who exists on the face of the earth, there's no other people, you still will do things that will be negative for you if you just follow your own desires because you necessarily can't think into the future,
Okay.
right? If you're not a disciplined person, you're not thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year. And so there's an aspect of discipline that is a respect of my future self, again, seeing myself in a society. And this society is actually like the person himself is a society, because who I am today is not who I am going to be, 10 years from now.
Right.
In not in a spiritual way, like I am the person that I'm going to be, but like I'm going to have many different experiences. Some things are going to happen to me that are going to shape me. Even physical things can happen to me, whether it's mental things, that sort of stuff. All of it can happen to me, and I'm constantly changing. And therefore, like, I am a society within myself. 40-year-old Caleb is different than 30-year-old Caleb is different than 20-year-old Caleb.
Okay.
And those individuals have to have almost a coalescing society in and among themselves.
Yeah.
And so this is, by the way,
This is really like
metaphysical. Yeah. Well, that's why our God is so powerful, because he says, I am.
Yeah.
And his point is like, the being, the essence, the existence that I have at this very moment is the same existence that I have in your concept of future.
Okay.
Because God is always at the same time. He's unbounded.
Yeah.
So again, discipline. Yeah, well, it is kind of. But then, so for human beings, because we are finite and time-bound creatures, discipline is something that is necessary for us, because there are so many causal inputs in our lives.
Okay. And so we probably, as parents with our children, trying to make this a little practical here, with our children, we're disciplining them, and as they grow, we want them to learn how to discipline themselves, right? And to lead a life, and that comes from fearing God. That comes from that respect of God.
Right. So that's what the Proverbs would say.
Yeah.
So if people are following along with the Proverbs series that I'm doing, the Proverbs essentially will tell you discipline is the ability to see outside of your own moment, which is discipline, right? Because it is the thought that what I want at this very moment is not good for me or not good for somebody else, because of an existence that is outside of my current moment.
Okay.
So you're training them to see outside themselves.
Yeah.
That's really, if you want to be super, super simple about it, that's what discipline
to
is.
realize they're not the center of the universe. Yeah, that's important. Okay, so they do need to learn to respect us, or their parents. But so is this respect, do we demand it of them, or do we earn it from them? How do we get that respect?
Yeah, so to some extent it's naturally just going to occur. Being the primary caregivers of your children, being the people that are just around your children the most, at least in the first couple months, if not years of their life, that's going to just build a natural affinity between you and your children, and they're going to respect you purely because of your capability. They cannot get themselves food. You can get them food. Therefore, they realize that, just to make it sort of psychological, like they realize their underperforming capacity, and they realize your performing capacity, and therefore say, I need to maintain the positive relationship between me and this person, or otherwise I don't eat. There's this natural respect that is built into that relationship. The parent's job is to nurture that, right? So this gets back to the idea that God created authority and gives us the fourth commandment. Like he built humans to naturally fall into authority. Now sin corrupts that, but there's a natural mechanism that God creates that authority is going to be respected. Sin breaks it, of course, but our job as parents is to nurture that natural inclination, that created inclination in your children to respect authority, and to help them see that actually rebelling against that authority isn't a wise thing.
That's interesting, because it's kind of like you're earning their respect, but it's a different view on it. So it's less about like, I need to get you to like me because I need you to follow me, but it's more like, you want to follow me, and I'm going to encourage that as much as, you use the word nurture, that as much as possible. And I like that, because the idea of, follow me, child, do what I say, like, that's wrong to some extent. Not wrong. That cannot stand alone. That will not be sufficient. You need your kid to respect you out of personal desire, but it's not like you're just like begging them, please respect me. You're just encouraging it.
Yeah, I would say, it's simplification, but if you have that attitude towards your child that like, you need to respect me because I'm the parent, not in every situation is that a bad thing, but it at least reveals a certain sense in my own heart that I need my child to obey me in order to actualize myself. So in order to feel like I am a good parent or feel like I'm not a pushover, I need you to obey me.
Yeah.
Which is a sinful desire in me.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not going to have that desire if you're living from the gospel, which says, I am already fully actualized in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
God gives me the vocation of parent to nurture up this next also actualized human in their baptism, and help them see the value in what God has done for them, because their ultimate relationship is not between me and them, but between them and God. And I'm just a nurturer on that path. Yeah. So very often when we demand obedience from our children, I think we have a sinful impulse that says, like, I need you to obey me so that I can realize myself and who I want to be.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how I personally, like, especially when our kids are in public, well, our toddlers in public, like this idea of you need to behave because I need to look good, which is the sinful part in me where it's like, this is where people will know if I'm a good parent or not, which is not true. That's such a simplification of what good parenting is, and it's a sinful way for me to look at it. Like, of course I want her to learn to obey me, but it's not out of my own needs. I want her to learn to obey for her own sake, so that she sees that the order is good.
Yeah, and I struggle with that too. I mean, recently we were sitting at dinner and Irene yelled too loud at the table, and I reacted in anger at her because I guess I perceive myself to be somebody who doesn't make loud noises or lose their cool very often. And I, in a sense, want my children to be that way too, because I think that's a healthy way to be, which may or may not be true, but that's just how I perceive myself. And so the idea of my children are loud and obnoxious, that grinds against me because I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
Right. And so my children might be loud and obnoxious. That's, at points in their life, or grow up to be adults that are loud and obnoxious. And that may not necessarily be sinful, but because I was projecting my need to actualize myself on my children, I reacted angrily.
Wow, good self-insight. That's good.
This is what you get when you're married to somebody who's as neurotic as I am.
That's good. I'm thankful that, I don't know, I think it's probably a fear of, little marriage tangent, but a fear that my spouse needs to know all of their sinful points, but you are already very aware of, if there's a sinful point in you, you're like, I already know it. That's good. I don't need to point it out.
That's not always true, but
well, I think
it can be true very often.
All right. Good. I had a comment I wanted to make on if you do have the idea on the other side of I need to earn my child's favor and earn their respect. I was thinking about how exhausting that would be. I was watching a video on discipline and the idea that your kids should completely just want to do what mom and dad say, and you can kind of become a slave to that need of please listen to me, and because I love you and because you're funny and cute, and you're kind of begging your child, and then they become in a sense the person in charge, and you're not begging your child to follow you. That's not the point. But you do need to nurture that inward desire to follow parents.
Mm-hmm. North Americans are by nature pragmatists, right?
Mm-hmm.
We choose to do things very often because of our perception of whether it works or not. Yeah. And so because we want to see a certain type of behavior out of our children, we will do whatever we feel we need to do in order to get that type of behavior out of them. Mm-hmm. When, again, this is where the gospel is really helpful. If I realize that the only reason that my children will or will not obey me is because of their relationship with God, ultimately. Sure, I play a role in that, certainly, but if I realize that that's the only reason they're really going to obey me or not obey me or respect me when they're adults or not respect me when they're adults, therefore I don't have to make a choice to do something as a parent in discipline because I think it's going to work, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. There might be a certain level of pragmatism you want to have, but I don't need to earn my children's respect because at the end of the day, I really can't. What I can do is be a principled, respectable person by God's word, and then the results will take care of themselves, right? And this is, again, the Christian worldview, that we don't do anything because we think it's going to produce a certain result, because all the results have been given to us in Jesus. We make every choice that we make about how we're going to spend our resources, whether it be time or energy or money or whatever, based on what is objectively true and good because of the scriptures. And sometimes you do what is objectively good and true by the scriptures and you get a negative result. like
Yeah.
Jesus,
Yeah.
who did everything objectively true and right by the scriptures and then got killed by himself. So, like, if we think of parenting that way too, think less about, I want this type of behavior, therefore I need to do this type of thing in order to get that behavior, and more think in terms of what is right and true and good by the scriptures, and then that will actually have a more likely effect, more likely outcome of actually bringing about the behavior you want from your children.
Yeah. So you're not trying to like get to the goal. It's not like ends justify the means. You're trying to get to the goal. You're more about the means and the process of, and hope that the goal ends out that way. I was just listening to a podcast actually on how the train me up in the way I should go. When I'm old, I'll not turn from it proverb. And that is not a promise. That if you train up your child right, they will definitely turn out. That is just something that's probable. So take that training seriously. That's very important. And it's not to just say like, oh, it's not going to for sure happen, so don't worry about it. Like, yes, take it seriously, but don't expect that as a promise.
Yeah, true.
Good.
Very well.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so I had another question. And so you're trying to get your child to realize that they are part of something bigger, part of that order. But where are they starting from? Like, are they... I think the philosophy now is that your kid is good and basically awaken that good in them. I actually think of this country song. I don't know exactly how it goes, but I believe most people are good. I'm not going to try and sing it. I did just try and sing it. I believe most people are good, and like everyone's pretty much good, and that you just need to awaken that goodness in them.
Yeah, and you can look back on the philosophical roots of that style of thinking. And I think there are just a number of logical inconsistencies with that as you look at human beings. I mean, we just talked about this in my sermon on Sunday, not directly, but indirectly, that if you have a behavior in your life that is negative, self-destructive, you know that it is, you know how to fix it, and you want to fix it, but you don't, then you can't say people are by nature good. Because even if that thing is a result of something that happened to you, because of your good nature, will be able to figure it out and get on the right side of it. But the very fact that we can't shows that we don't have a good nature to start. And so, yeah, like, I mean, theologically, we would say we're sinful from birth, sinful from the time our parents conceive us, and therefore we necessarily cannot assume a child has good intentions by nature.
Yeah.
Right? And while they might have good behavior because of discipline or because of consequences, they do not desire to do that by nature.
Yeah. Good. Listen to the sermon from last Sunday. Little plug there. So, okay. I don't know if I have any comments on that. That's just a bunch of good thoughts there. One last thing that I wanted to talk about is how boundaries that we set for our kids, we want to eventually be moving them ahead. Like, and I was thinking of the idea that you don't want your kid to like all of a sudden be like, Mom and Dad, move this boundary for me. Instead, you want to like encourage them to like grow up in that way. You want to encourage them to like follow or figure out the respect and the order of the world themselves, and not just like bind them in as much. I don't know if I'm being clear there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, right, children are naturally going to test boundaries. And I think that's one of the things that I think like a lot of parents get wrong, is they see misbehavior in their children and they immediately think, my child has lost it, they've become a misbehaving child, they're a trouble child, whatever. When they're not, they're just trying to figure out where the fence is. Every child wants to know where the fence is so that they can know where they can play and where they're not supposed to go. Because any other reality is painful, psychologically painful.
Yeah.
Like, what if you were in a society and you had you had no idea what the laws were? Like, you didn't know whether you could go outside of your house or not, or whether you could drive a certain speed, or whether you could even own a car, or whether people saw you and they thought you were doing this thing or that thing wrong. Like,
just chaos.
That's a terrible place to be. And so that's what you're doing to your children, is you're ushering them into a society that is without boundaries if you're not showing them exactly where those boundaries are. And so where you haven't shown them boundaries, they're going to try to find those boundaries.
Yeah.
As far as moving the boundaries, I mean, we haven't really gone down that path very much with our own children yet, because they're still pretty young. But I think it's to some extent a cooperative effort, right? Because on the one hand, you don't want your children to always be in their, 2-year-old boundaries. Like you want them to grow up, and so you want to expand the boundaries for them. On the other hand, you don't want them to be dictating when the boundaries get expanded.
Yeah.
So
they're probably
it is
looking for opportunities to do that. Like, oh man,
Right.
you can start making your own snacks. Like, great, I'm going to give you this opportunity, and that way you don't have to ask me. You can do it yourself. And getting excited about those. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, it's fine. That's right.
Yeah.
It's a good example. So I think the fence analogy is really helpful for me, at least. That, like, if I think of my what I'm doing with my children is a yard, and there's a fence around it, and I need to expand the fence constantly. Well, what I'm going to first do is I'm going to first look over the fence and see what's over there. So I can be proactively, before my children are even thinking about what's on the other side of the fence, I've thought about what's on the other side of the fence. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to handle the next stage of expanding the fence. And then when I expand the fence, maybe I'm pushing the analogy too far. When I expand the fence, I'm going to have them help me pull out the stakes and put the new stakes into the ground in the new place. So I'm not just going to say, now you can go over there. I'm going to say, let's move the stake together. Let's figure out exactly what your boundary should be so that you're online with me. And then I'm going to walk with you as you first try doing this new thing, and then I'll let you freely play within those boundaries.
Yeah, you're getting on a really good point that parenting is hard work, and you have to think so much about it. You have to be 2 steps ahead, and you're thinking about it and talking with each other about it, and then putting in lots of effort and time. And I think going into parenting, I definitely thought it would just be more chill than what it is. And I knew there'd be discipline and stuff, but I think I had this perception of it's just a lot of playing with your kids, and you gotta make the meals and clean up and stuff, but it's just sort of fun. And I don't know, the more I see of the world around us and how a lot of kids are growing up and stuff, I'm ooh, we gotta put in work. We gotta put in a lot of work because you train up your child in the way they should go, and training is hard.
Yeah, it's always easier to step into something that's already existing rather than build something from the ground up. I mean, if you worked in a business context, you know that, right? It's much easier to join a business that's already running rather than start your own business. And the same thing is true with children. There is a high level of investment, time and effort that comes into starting something from the ground up, building a child from infancy. But it is also far more rewarding, right? So if you've built your own business and you know what that feels like, you know that's way better than just working at whatever restaurant until you got to the manager position.
Yeah, I would also say with that analogy, though, that the importance of those first the beginning of the process, how important the beginning of the process is for directing where it goes. So the beginning of, I just already see the fruits of our hard work with Irene, so important. We've already started disciplining her in mild little ways, nothing serious, but it's just...
We've only locked her in the closet twice.
Oh, don't say that on the internet. Don't do that. So just lost my train of thought. Just the importance of directing them young, because then that'll set the tone. And then at that point, it's still keeping them in that narrow path that you're setting them down. How important that is. Good. I'm out of thoughts. Are you?
It's good with me.
Okay. I wanted to say one thing. Our next episode, we're going to talk about how discipline is part of your whole parenting style, which is part of your whole worldview and who you are as a person. So we're going to talk a bit about that, and we'll get into practical stuff in other episodes as well. So if you have any questions, comments, things you want us to talk about, something we missed, or a thought on it, please comment.
We're not the experts. We're just
we're
just willing to let you see how not experts we are.
Yeah.
And just wrestle with some thoughts, see how they play out. So thanks for taking time to watch.
Yep.
See you soon.
Sounds good.